was talking with a lady right outside, and she just had a baby, and she said, "This movie is my life." Do you think that identification is that important with your character, Charlize?
I mean, I think the movie experience is about sitting in a dark room and feeling, you know, the circumstances might be completely different, but on some level that you're watching something that you can relate to in some sense. I think that human condition part of it is what makes the movie-going experience so great. And I think you're always hoping that, you know, I always read something and I'm like, I love this, and I totally relate to this. I hope other people will. And that doesn't always happen, but in this case, we've had such a great response, not just from mothers, but from fathers, you know, feeling just an empathetic understanding of things that they experienced and never really truly understood.
Jason, do you know, young adult, this one, do you realize that you and Diablo, you're kind of drawing up a portrait of the 21st century woman at different period of her life? Is that the point? Can you talk about this plan that you have?
I'm not sure if there's a point or a plan. I suppose 10 years ago, I met Diablo, and what I didn't realize was that I was meeting this storytelling life partner, and that we were somehow going to start writing this mutual diary together over the course of our lifetimes. And we were very lucky that on our second film, we met this young woman. And
I crashed the
party. And she became the voice of that diary. So we're all around the same age, and we are somehow, Diablo seems to be articulating something that we're usually all feeling. And then we get the joy of going to set and actually bringing it to life.
What you do in this film, Charlize, is unbelievable. I mean, the transformation you're going through, not only physical, but also kind of intellectual, is amazing to watch. Can you talk about how you approach that, how you went through this transformation?
Cheeseburgers?
Yeah, a lot of cheeseburgers for breakfast. You know, when Jason literally said, I have our next project, and I was like, cool. and then I read it, and I knew after reading it, I knew that I would have to physically transform for the role. But I was also just like, I just finished this film, Atomic Blonde, and I was like in the best shape of my life. And I was secretly hoping I could get through one summer rocking a bikini in that body. And Jason was like, right? And I was like, yeah, no, I have to gain some weight for this. And we always just talk. I mean, I think a lot of who the character becomes is just through conversation. We spend a lot of time just really talking about some of the smaller detail that really kind of informs a lot of the bigger parts of the character. There was a lot of stuff about this that was like a no-brainer, and I was kind of prepared for what it was. I think the one thing that I wasn't prepared for was how much the way I was eating and what I was eating was going to affect me emotionally and mentally. And I actually, for the first time in my life, really kind of struggled with depression. And that I wasn't expecting at all. So that kind of like took me by shock when we started shooting the film. And I felt very lucky that I had a partner in crime that saw all of that and brought it into the film in a way that I think a lot of filmmakers might have totally just missed that and been scared of it and been like, oh God, you're not in great shape, like mentally. So, but Jason really embraced it, and I felt so lucky because I felt like I had a friend who just really understood what I was going through, and I wasn't prepared for it.
I'm just happy that she's, blaming the depression on the pizza and not me.
Did you hesitate to ask her? I mean, you asked her to go very far.
I'm sorry?
Did you hesitate to ask Charlize?
No.
I mean,
No.
No, he has no hesitation.
No, I mean, look, usually it's a director's job to push their actors, but, Charlize is one of the few actors you just never have to ask to do anything. She's constantly, fearlessly looking into how to make something more real no matter what. And frankly, the scary thing about working with an actress who's like that is asking them to pull back, because I know that you're willing to kind of go anywhere.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of physicality to the role, not physicality like Atomic Blonde, but kind of in a different way. And And the emotionality was actually strangely very muscular too. But no, our everyday conversations are, how do we make this more real? How do we bring detail into motherhood that we haven't seen on screen before? How can this movie not just be about, oh, you don't get any sleep at night? It's not about that. Beyond the great details of things like the cell phone falling on the baby and putting the baby on top of the dryer, it gets into, what does it feel like when you start to lose your identity? What does it feel like when you start to kind of forget where you are in the arc of life, and when your marriage goes quiet? And how can we make those moments feel real?
All right, let's talk about the subtleties. I mean, there is a lot of those in your directing. For example, the scene when Charlie's in the coffee shop and she meets her old friend, and that's when it starts. And you move the camera, you're deframing a little. How do you play on that? How do you play on the subtleties and the meaning of directing?
You know, I'm very lucky. I'm surrounded by very smart people, and what we try to do is start early conversations that get us towards what the movie's really about. One of my favorite details from that scene is the song that's playing in the coffee shop is the song that's going to play later when Tully plays her favorite song. So I don't know, it goes down to the prep work, I guess.
Charlize, I went through your filmography while preparing, and not a lot of a movie is not all masterpieces, but there's always a sense
Thank
of
you,
risk.
sir, for your truth and honesty.
Let's talk about those.
Yes, let's talk about those shitty movies.
No, but you'll see there's a compliment hiding somewhere.
It's one thing to be good in a good movie. It's a whole other thing.
There's always a sense of risk. You always go for the risk.
Oh, well, thank
Whether
you.
It's physical
You
action,
picked it up. You picked it up.
Getting better. Or working with this guy here. Why do you need it? Why do you need the risk?
I think the older I've become, the more you realize that it is a lot of time and energy that you have to give when you decide to make a film. I don't know how to do it any other way. And I feel like the last maybe decade of my career, maybe a little bit more, I've been fortunate enough to be handed great opportunities by great filmmakers like Jason. And I think, when I was starting out my career, I was trying so hard to make interesting choices and to create interesting characters, but I wasn't necessarily, I guess, appreciated so much for it. I was really there to service a very specific thing, whether it was a girlfriend or a wife, and the movie wasn't really about that. But I remember really trying my best to, come up with interesting things that I could bring, and it not necessarily always being appreciated. And I feel like, after I did Monster, great opportunities came to me, great filmmakers came to me, and all of a sudden I had that appreciation for it and that encouragement for that stuff to make interesting choices and to take a risk and to do something that doesn't necessarily feel like it's the safe choice or the easy route. And it's when I flourish. I think it's why I know I love my job so much, because I've never been in a situation with a great filmmaker like, when I work with Jason, there's nothing about any of the choices that we make, whether some of them end up in the movie or some of them don't, that I regret. Because ultimately, I'm in a safe space where I know my filmmaker is going to ultimately protect me, so why wouldn't I take the risk? I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen? It ends up on the editing floor and the crew laughs at me? Like, that's really the worst thing that could happen.
A question for you both. I mean, when you see the film, you see young adult also, your kind of encounter is obvious. I mean, there's some things that's happening in his movie, and then something that a way you direct Charlize that is very special. The question is very simple and very difficult. Jason, why Charlize? Charlize, why Jason?
Well, that's easy for me. I basically made it very clear, in maybe not a very subtle way, to Jason that I wanted to work with him. Well, I loved his film so much, and I made sure that he knew that I wanted to work with him. And so I think once you knew that, I don't know, and then the project was right.
At the Oscars.
I was blessed to be stuck behind him or in front of you, I can't remember, trying to be ushered into the theater for the Oscars, and I was like, this is my opportunity. And I basically just blocked him on a wall, and I was like, listen, let me tell you something, we need to work together.
It's one of the great moments of my life.
Oh God.
It's the fearlessness. And it's a word that gets used all the time with Charlize, and I don't think it gets used enough. We're trying to make tricky movies. We're trying to make really honest movies. And we're making movies about women who could so easily be judged in the writing, in the portrayal, in the final film. And they could be heroized, they could be villainized. And the trick is, how do you make them real? And it's a really scary thing to do. And Charlize is one of the only actresses on Earth who can do that, who has empathy for the characters that she's playing and never allows you to simply put them on a box on either side. And as a producer, she protects me. So she talks a lot about the safe space that we have on set, but a lot of that is because as a producer, she surrounds the film and acts almost like a bodyguard for the story.